Dan Mahar, we have burdened our faithful listeners these last couple of weeks, going over an hour on each of our last couple of episodes. But our buddy Gar comes to the rescue with an email to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Good morning, gentlemen. I always enjoy the podcast, but dang, this week's was really great listening. While listening, oftentimes I said to myself, that's a good point. He said it over and over and over again. So at least the content was reaching ears that, hey, they thought we made some good points last week, Dan.
Well, thank you, Gar. It's really good to hear that feedback. Sometimes when we run a little long, we're a little concerned did we do too much, but we really appreciate the feedback.
And I think it just goes to show how much there is to talk about. That includes, of course, this week. And let's begin with a shout out to those Peterborough Petes. Hang on, everybody. Just hang on. The record for futility in the OHL appears to be safe. The Petes get their third win of the season, 26 games in. So we all know the 1995 London Knights, who won just 3 of 66. It looks to be safe, if you will. I don't think the Petes are going to go the next 42 without winning one more game, Dan Mahar.
No, and I hate to keep saying I told you so, but fans of Peterborough, did I not tell you the 4 game thing was never in doubt? You could tell the compete was there, the battle was there. They were starting to be in a lot more games, and battled back today at home to take it in overtime. So that they're starting to show some character. Gavin Bryant with the winner, an older player, some veteran leadership putting up. So yeah, you're fine, Peterborough. It's going to start to turn.
Dan is giving away our secrets. He said today, meaning yes, we are recording on Sunday after the day's action. Gavin Bryant getting it done against his former team in Niagara. From Owen Sound to Niagara, didn't suit up this year, gets traded to Peterborough, gets 2 goals, including that OT winner. And just one more note from this past weekend, Dan, as we were both in the same arena for the same game on Friday night, Kitchener Rangers 6, Owen Sound Attack 5. But if that game didn't encapsulate why junior hockey is as much fun as it is, I don't know what would. You put that in a bottle and you sell it to the fans.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I have to give away one more secret. I actually was not in the building on Friday. I had to skip that one for a work function, but
Oh
I
my
did
God.
catch
Wait,
up.
what?
I
Wait, wait,
know,
wait,
I
wait. No,
know.
stop. Priorities, Mahar. What the?
I
Work. Work.
I did send my scouts. Got great scouting reports. Was getting texts through the evening, so it sounded like it was one of those classic junior hockey games. Mistakes on all sides, which makes it entertaining, right?
I am so disappointed in you letting work trump your chance to be at one of the classic junior hockey games. But yes, you're right. Don't ever leave your seat early lest you miss what happened in Kitchener on Friday night with lead changes. 5 goals, put it this way, 5 goals scored total combined through the first 2 periods. It's a 3-2 Ranger lead going into the third. And then the teams combined for 6 in the third period, each team scoring 3 awfully quickly, and the Rangers getting the final 3 for the 6-5 win. Lots of fun. That's what junior hockey is all about. Okay, junior hockey this year, Dan, seems to be about suspensions. Can I say it that way? And a lot of talk this past week about Ryder Bolton's 8-game ban. 4 for reckless use of the stick, 4 more because he's a repeat offender. What say you, Mr. Mahar?
When you see the track record there, the number of games missed in a small amount of time he's actually played, you start to wonder, at what point is the coach going to rein him in? Is what point is he pointless in the lineup, et cetera, et cetera. So to see it keep happening, one has to assume that Ryder Bolton has just decided the only way I'm going to make a career in hockey is by playing this way. And I'll take the suspensions, I'll take whatever comes with it. But the other team on the ice knows I'm nasty. They have to keep their head up when I'm out there. I'm going to be in their heads and I'm just going to keep doing it. And the London Knights seem okay with it because it's not the first time they've rolled players that do this, and it won't be the last.
This is the 4th suspension of the season for Ryder Bolton. If, and I emphasize the if, you count that kind of bogus, no helmet, losing the helmet in the preseason. I don't know that we count that one. I'm not so sure it was a suspension-worthy offense, but nonetheless, it happened in the preseason. 3 now in the regular season, hence the extra 4 games as that repeat offender. A couple of narratives from this one that I'm finding interesting to follow, Dan. One of them being all the talk about the number of suspensions we're seeing in the OHL this year. And I'll tell you what, I'm not listening to that at all. I love what the league has been doing in terms of making sure that we know that the suspensions have been levied, what they are, why they occurred, and how long the player is going to be out for. We've been harping on this for a number of years on this podcast, saying you got to be more transparent with people. And so you kind of get caught with this double-edged sword, right? Right? On the one hand, it's all about, oh my gosh, look at all the suspension. This is terrible. This is terrible. On the other hand, you're making it very clear, not only to fans, so they know who's going to be in the lineup and when, but you're also making it very clear to everybody associated with this game where the line is. And I think that's a great message to be sending out to the hockey world, to the parents that want their kids to play in what I still believe is the greatest development league in the world. Let them know that you take this stuff seriously. You are penalizing it, you are suspending it, etc. So I'm here for the way the league is conducting its affairs this season by making sure we all know about the suspensions, how long they're going to be, and what they're for. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm all for everything you just said, for sure. I think when it comes to discipline, league discipline, there's always going to be some disagreement over consistency. But the one thing we can get right is the communication and explaining clearly why the suspension occurred, what the league saw. That is fantastic. And I would also love to see a little more explanation too about how repeat offenses factor in. Some of those things, because we've seen some repeat offenders this week. You mentioned Ryder Bolton. We also had Zane Parekh with another suspension. So just to clear up, how the league sees that, how they factor it in. Does it have anything to do with the pedigree of the player? There's a lot that the disciplinary department has to deal with, and not everyone's going to agree. So communication goes a long way.
Funny you should mention Zane Parekh because Parekh and James Go of Saginaw also suspended this past week. And that ties into the other narrative I've been hearing, which I find so interesting. For many a year, and probably still into this year, there are fans in 19 OHL markets that believe at the bottom of their very hearts that the league, for some reason and somehow, some way, favors the London Knights. The London Knights are the favorite child of the Ontario Hockey League. Heck, go back and listen to this podcast with former OHL Commissioner David Branch, and I point blank asked him the question in jest, but why are the London Knights your favorite team? Why do you give them preferential treatment? We had a good laugh about it, but it's the prevailing narrative in the league, has been for many years. But now, with especially this latest suspension to Ryder Bolton, fans primarily in London, you can understand it's their player that's been suspended, but all the talk seems to be, well, London is the team that's in the crosshairs of the league right now. Why is the league picking on the London Knights? This it's almost like it's never happened before. I don't know. I find it interesting, and London fans and others have been pointing out, hey, wait a minute, if this is 4 games for Bolton, why is this less for James Go? Why is this less for James Parekh or for Zane Parekh? Pardon me. The bottom line is the fans of a team whose player got suspended is never going to be happy with it. I think we're always going to ask questions that you alluded to before. What about the pedigree of the player? How much does that factor into any possible supplemental discipline? Do I need to bring up the 1993 NHL playoffs again? Gretzky high sticked Gilmore should not have been in that LA Kings game 6 to win it in overtime. My Leafs should have been in the Stanley Cup that year. Anyway, we're always going to have those conversations. Meh. But I find it interesting that the league seems to have turned itself 180 here. And now all of a sudden it's the league hates the London Knights instead of favors them for a change.
Yeah, those narratives are always going to circle in fan circles, are they not? Especially game to game. Oh, the refs jobbed us tonight. People tend to see what impacts them personally, negatively or positively, and they'll ignore the positive when it comes to officiating and discipline, but they're all over the negative. We could create or sort of commit 7 or 8 fouls in a game that didn't get called, but the second they call one, oh, that was a terrible call, right? So I think we can chalk some of this up to just some good old bias, which a lot of us have. But in general, I think the league gets it pretty close to right, and they're not picking on anyone. Most of the offenses I think we've seen that were suspended Most would agree those were suspension worthy things. You can argue over the length, you can argue over the who, but if your team's showing up in the suspension list more often than not, you probably got to own it.
All right, let's argue over the length a little bit here because Michael Misa, yes, that Michael Misa, who leads the Ontario Hockey League with 25 goals this season, who's going to go in the first round in the National Hockey League draft next June, is facing a suspension. The book says it's an automatic 5. I think there is precedent to make this a lower suspension, but the bottom line is Michael Misa has been, well, will be, it hasn't been officially announced yet, but if the league is keeping up with its own precedent, Michael Misa will be suspended because he flipped a teddy bear into the stands. The league is very clear on this. So it's the teddy bear game in Sarnia. Michael Misa is there with the Saginaw Spirit. Sarnia scores. The Bears get thrown onto the ice just like they do in every other OHL arena at this time of year. And Misa flips one of those bears off the ice back into the crowd. The book is clear on this. If you shoot something from the playing surface into the crowd, it is a 5-game suspension. Dan, does Michael Misa get 5 games for this?
You know, those of us that were around for Owen Tippett flipping a foam puck into the stands and remembering his suspension getting reduced, I suspect that Michael Mises will get reduced on the fact that the object he flung into the stands was neither done maliciously nor was it the type of object that was likely going to injure anyone. Having said that, you said it right up front, Mike. The league is extremely clear about this rule. So when I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, what a stupid rule! You can't possibly suspend him for that," well, you can because these players know full well you don't do it. Period. You don't do it out of frustration. You don't do it if it's styrofoam for crying out loud. Just don't do it. And being on the teddy bear day, to me, that makes it even that much sillier because those things are coming down for charity. They're being collected for kids for Christmas gifts. When you're flinging it back into the stands, what are you really doing? So I suspect, to answer your question, Mike, it's going to get reduced, but it will be a suspension.
I agree wholeheartedly. The Owen Tippett example from 2018, I think, is the relevant precedent in this case, Your Honor. Tippett magically was still able to maintain his World Junior Hockey Championship eligibility too when that suspension was reduced. Misa will get a game, in my opinion. We'll see if the league feels differently when the suspension length is announced. But you touched on the important part about this. And look, it sounds goofy. It was made fun of back in 2018 when Owen Tippett, Florida Panthers prospect, was suspended by the OHL for flipping a foam puck into the stands. Ironically, a puck that had been thrown onto the ice by a fan in the stands, right? So if you're a player, they can throw stuff at you, but you can't flip it back. Anyway, I'll leave that there. But it sounds pretty goofy that a player is about to be suspended for flipping a stuffed animal back into the crowd. But the bottom line is here, you don't want players, and that's why the rule is as black and white as it is. You don't want players to get into the habit of shooting anything from the playing surface back into the crowd. I know that pucks go to play, foul balls go out of play, players go out of play in different sports, right? Basketball, football, baseball, etc. And fans always need to be on their guard. But if a player is deliberately putting something out of the playing surface into the crowd, that is a much different story, and the suspension will most certainly follow. What a way for Michael Misa to have to sit out at least a game, a game coming up. It's wild.
It is, and if you go way back in our podcast history, Mike, we talked a lot about some of these things that people find silly, and we always say follow the trail to liability. And if you wonder why the league is so adamant that players can't be shooting anything into the stands, look no further than liability. You're susceptible to any kind of lawsuit the second your product starts doing that. So that's the difference between a fan doing it and the player doing it from the OHL's eyes. But follow the trail; it always ends at liability.
The big talk in this league off the ice continues to be expansion. Dan, you had a tidbit that you shared with me that we'll get into in just a moment. But our email inbox, ohlpodcast at rogers.com, is chock full of people with expansion related ideas and or questions. I'll start with one that came in from Jody. Guys, I listened to your podcast, really enjoy the information around the league. Thanks very much for that, Jody. I am puzzled by the OHL's expansion plans to certain USHL markets, such as Youngstown, Ohio. The city had lost 30 to 40% of its population in the past 10 years, and the arena in which they play is a mess. It's city owned and is in tough shape. The team presently residing in the arena only draws a few hundred a game, even though announced attendance is much higher. Concessions are closed, the building is falling in disrepair. Why are we so anxious to go to a location like this? We have cities in Ontario that are much better fits: Cornwall, Hamilton, Burlington, Chatham. It's not that I mind diving into the States, but there must be some evaluation of the location and not just give an entrance because they want to find a home. Dan, what do you think? Youngstown, Muskegon, are we on the right track here?
Jody raised a very good point. We might have jumped the gun a little, assuming those are the two. Just because they're the ones that reached out formally, publicly, we know they've reached out, does not necessarily mean those are the two that are going to be admitted, or anyone else will be admitted. So there is a difference between Youngstown and Muskegon. You nailed it with the rink, Jody. The rink in Muskegon, little fuller, little more up to standard, we'll call it. Youngstown has challenges, and that means that they'll have to overcome those before they accept them into the OHL. And you're right, there are probably better markets. The only reason any of this is even being talked about is, as we referenced on the last podcast, is that the OHL sees an opportunity here to seize upon some of these ready, willing franchises in the USHL and gain that stranglehold as the best developmental league. And if they reject some of these cities, they have to think twice, because who knows where they'll pop up and if they'll be a strong competitor again. Doesn't mean Youngstown's coming in, just means they have reached out, and you just hit on some of the reasons why they've reached out.
So I'll add to this. First of all, I haven't seen the arenas for myself. I'm not in the market, and I don't have any contacts there, at least not yet, that I can touch base with to determine how accurate Jody's information is. Anecdotally, I have heard similar about the markets not being the best, the arenas being in rougher shape. But if I'm being brutally honest, not every arena and environment in this league is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. They're not all Canada Life places in London, okay, or cathedrals like the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium. So don't forget that. Here's what is most interesting to me and what I would suggest to you, and that is simply follow the money. I know that we could blue sky a whole bunch of other markets that we might rather see as fans of the game, or where we might think it's the right sized market for the OHL, etc. But because Muskegon and Youngstown have already made these overtures and are looking pretty serious, I think that if there is money to be made by expansion into those markets and more, which the Ontario Hockey League would make, they would be interested in doing that. It is not a coincidence from where I'm sitting. I might have missed this in the past, I grant you. But in my 20 plus years in this league, never have I ever heard the league publicly declare what they declared earlier this season. And that is the economic impact of their 20 Ontario Hockey League teams. It was a $450 million impact in the communities where these teams operate. They might talk about that stuff at Board of Governors meetings. I've never heard them share that publicly before. And I think there's some method to that madness. You take 20 teams, you divide them from $450 million, and you're 20 million plus per market on average economic impact into a community. Now, you take that number and that math and add it to what I have heard from two fairly well-heeled sources in this league. We were just shooting the breeze. So I won't name them other because they didn't say I could, and I didn't tell them I was fishing for information. It just came up in conversation. But they are well connected in this league, and they shared numbers north of 20 up to $30 million as expansion fees that would be a part of Muskegon and Youngstown. So if you're the Ontario Hockey League and there's an opportunity for you to cash in for 40, 50, 60 million dollars with just two more teams, would you do it? And then where do we keep going from there? So follow the money is the long and the short of it, but that's kind of what I've been hearing around these two markets particularly, and you can just add on to there any other team that joins the league.
Really interesting information there, Mike. And I'm not one to doubt your sources anyway. Those expansion fees sound well north of what I would have assumed, but I won't doubt the sources. What the point, my takeaway from that, and to answer the question we originally got an email, is that any team coming into the league is going to have to check a number of boxes and meet a bunch of criteria the league has set out for them around guaranteed attendance, guaranteed revenue, all those types of things, guaranteed operating budget. So seems like a long shot for a place like Youngstown when you start talking about those expansion fees, but rest assured the league isn't just going to admit them then figure it out later. They're going to have to check a number of those boxes. And I think people get nervous at the short timeline saying, well, if it's going to be for next year, are we going to overlook some things that are going to come back to bite them? It's possible, but they're going to have a solid business plan, and that's going to come straight from the owner. And there's going to be all of the risk, I would assume, is going to be assumed mostly by the franchise itself.
So Jody might be happier because it's probably a market that he can relate to better with the rumblings you've been hearing, Dan, around Belleville.
Yeah, so and I'll credit Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News for this one. One of the first ones I saw, but a couple have since reported it that hearing strong rumors that the Belleville Bulls, we'll call them the Bulls, assume they might be the Bulls again, would be returning to the OHL. Which I mean, I would love. You know my history with that. A lot of good memories going to games in Belleville, but not much more information at this point, other than they would have to resolve where the AHL team's playing. Sounds like the Belleville Senators might not be long for that city. That would be someone else's problem, but strong rumblings that the Belleville OHL history might resume sooner than we think.
A lot of conversation around Hamilton being where the baby Sens would end up going. If I can just share and listen, I get heat for this all the time. It's nothing personal, Hamilton. I love the city. I love its grittiness. I love me some Oski wee wee with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, okay? But how many times? How many times? It's like Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown. How many times do we put a damn hockey team back in Hamilton and watch it wither away on the vine? I mean, you want to go back to the Finn Cups. How about the Red Wings? How about the Dukes? How about the Bulldogs? It never works. AHL, OHL, OHA, take your pick. For whatever reason, Hamilton just doesn't seem to get it done when it comes to hockey. So I don't know why. I get that it makes some sense. First Ontario Center's being renovated. The league's been there before. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know why Hamilton. I don't know why Hamilton. I'll throw out a possibility here. What if, because in Ottawa, they're building a new downtown arena. So that big old barn out in Canada where the Ottawa Senators play right now, could that become home to an American Hockey League team? So the baby Sens and the NHL Sens are in the same geographic area, the same city, the same postal code, etc. Michael Landlauer, who is part of that ownership group in Ottawa, does have ties to Hamilton too. And here's something else I know. The lease for the Belleville Senators, the baby Sens, goes for another 2 years in Belleville. In 2 years, First Ontario Centre in Hamilton should be ready for its new tenant. So the timing, the stars kind of align there. All I know for sure is that I'd be shocked if Belleville does not re-enter the Ontario Hockey League at some point. I don't know, and I kicked some tires just today, if there's an ownership group ready to bring a team there. I didn't get any concrete evidence of that, but there might be in a couple of years. All I would like to add to it is, please go to Ottawa. Don't go back to Hamilton. I'm sorry. Hamilton's messed it up too many times. That's me.
No, and that's fair. The cynicism is well earned. I just have to. I don't want to throw water on your dreams there, Mike. But I'm not sure I see the alignment in Ottawa because it's a long time before the downtown arena is ready. So you'd be talking about a cohabitation between AHL and NHL out in Canada for now. Don't know how that's going to work, being that the AHL is largely weekend games. And I expect that they've had enough trouble drawing NHL fans out there. I expect they'd have a nightmare trying to get AHL fans out to Canada at that rink, which I expect might be detonated once the Senators move downtown. But that's beside the point. I still think that this will resolve, and the end game for the OHL is that hopefully we'll have a Belleville team back.
Yeah, and I think that will absolutely be the case. The question is when and where the baby Sens relocate. But keep your ears on that and follow the money when it comes to Youngstown and Muskegon. Back to the inbox, OHL podcast at Rogers.com. Mike sends an email. New listener to the pod. Attaboy, Mikey. Welcome aboard the OHL podcast. Mike, though, says he's a longtime OHL/junior hockey fan from New York, but originally from Pennsylvania, Johnstown, PA, to be specific, the home to the movie Slapshot. I know this is a pipe dream, Mike writes, but would the OHL be interested in a place like Johnstown? Currently has a team in the North American Hockey League and enjoys solid fan support. Also, aside from Muskegon Youngstown, are there any other American locations that are considered, quote, favorites for OHL expansion? Enjoying the podcast. Thanks for the great content. Mike from Syracuse, New York. Mike, you're a beauty. Thanks for being with us. Dan, what do you think of other favorite American sites?
Yeah, thanks for the message, Mike. I think so. The OHL is extremely interested in some American sites, particularly in New York State. Assuming territorial rights stay the way they are, and getting a franchise there would give OHL first right on all those players. Admittedly, I'm not an expert on Johnstown. I've heard some talk of potentially Elmira, potentially Rochester. There are some markets, even Lake Placid. You never know. So there are some markets in New York State that I think will be explored heavily. The push you're seeing right now in American markets is exclusively geared towards those USHL teams and trying to capitalize on that opportunity while it exists. Once that smoke clears, probably we'll know a little more by next summer. Then we'll know a little more about what other markets are potential. But all I can say for sure is that Pennsylvania, sort of the northwest end of Pennsylvania and New York State would certainly be of interest to the league.
Lake Placid, you almost made me giddy with that little Miracle on Ice action going on. You threw water on one of my dreams already today, Dan. Let me see if I can get you to find another bucket for this wackadoodle idea. But what if? What if? And I don't have any intel that suggests there are other favorite U.S. markets, as Mike asked, besides Muskegon and Youngstown making overtures to the O. But what if? I'm just throwing something out there. What if the USHL basically became a fourth league under the Canadian Hockey League umbrella? So you've got the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League, and the U.S. Hockey League, all under the CHL umbrella. There you got your four leagues. Bring the champion of each league into a Memorial Cup every year. Bada bing, bada boom. Bob's your uncle. That makes every USHL market a current favorite OHL market.
Yeah, Mike, I've heard that idea floated a few times, and I'm certainly not at the point of exploration where I can throw water on that or green light it. What I will say is, I think one of the primary concerns with that role or that concept is that if you were just to make the USHL another CHL team and the fourth one to compete for the Memorial Cup, all sounds fine and dandy. All sounds like it lines up pretty well in terms of number of teams. I think what you've got is a bit of a discrepancy right now in terms of operating costs, budget, and potentially access to players. So I think that would have to be rectified. We already heard references to a couple of the arenas not being up to par. I can tell you on what I do know of the USHL, that's true of a number of their markets. The draw right now, a lot of markets between 1 and 2,000 per game. A lot of things would have to be upsized, I guess. And to upsize, you need the owners. You need the owners with money. You need commitment. You need investment. You need marketing. And do we even have the fans in some of those markets to get there? A lot of questions would have to be answered. But I have heard that concept floated. I just think there's a few steps before we can just say, yeah, that's fourth CHL league. Here we go.
For the record, Dan is absolutely correct on this. I cannot argue or tinker with a single point or idea. What I think the real opportunity is here is for the Ontario Hockey League to basically be choosy about which teams join the fold. Again, could be two as early as next year, four in the certainly not too distant future. How large the OHL gets from its current 20-team makeup remains to be seen, but yeah, I think the whole idea of incorporating the USHL as a fourth league under the CHL umbrella is a bit of a pipe dream, to say the very least, but it will be interesting. And those territorial rights that Dan was talking about before, Mike, to get specific to your question, Elmira sounds good. The Buffalo area, the league's always been interested in. So I think as a guy in Syracuse, you might just find a New York State team to be cheering for in the not too distant future in the OHL. Okay, how about the immediate future here on the OHL podcast? Our inbox is full, so it's time to empty it. Plus, we are watching your team as closely as you are. The wraparound also coming up on this week's episode of the OHL podcast. The 24-25 NHL season still has that new car smell. Heck, so does Austin Matthews of my favorite team because he just got back from injury. Let's go. The action is heating up at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It is super easy for first-timers to get started at DraftKings. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. It has been a busy week for the OHL podcast inbox. We love it. Make sure, please, like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram at the OHL podcast, and send emails anytime. OHLpodcast@Rogers.com. Jason responded to our conversation last week, Dan, on video review, and starts this way. Guys, I loved the segment on video review. I had a chance to attend a couple of different OHL games this past week, a Thursday in Barrie and a Friday in Sarnia. Attaboy, Jason. Get out there, support the league. Both of those games had video reviews of goals that took way too long, and in my opinion, didn't even come out with the correct judgment. Are the officials ever reprimanded or coached by their director after getting video reviews wrong? Also, how about just reviewing goals to see if they actually went in the net and none of the other factors, such as goaltender interference or offside? I believe this would speed up the process significantly. Jason in Ottawa. Love that city, Jay. Thanks for the email. Dan, what do you think? Follow up with directors if they get video reviews wrong and taking too darn long.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That's a great message. Yeah, there's a lot that we believe goes on. Like Mike, you would know better than I, but we've heard that the officials have discourse with their director of officiating after most games, pros, cons, what they did or didn't get right, and video review is probably a big piece of that too. And as to your question, Mike, I'll probably leave it to you about kind of the thinking around what's reviewed, how long it's going to take. But I think we all would agree that anything to speed this up is going to help and get it right. And some of the simple things like, did it actually enter the net? That should be pretty quick. But Mike, you may know a little more about the process there.
Well, I hear where Jason's coming from when he doesn't feel as though they reviewed it and got it right anyway. So what was the point of that whole review? That's tough when we're not the ones looking at the iPad and knowing exactly what it is they're looking for. So I'll just leave that as maybe a bit of fan bias or somebody that just sits there and felt the momentum of the life get sucked out of the building. Totally been there. That's why we talked about it last week, right? It's taking too long. As far as follow-up with their supervisor, the answer is yes. And I know there's always been talk, and fans want to be inside those conversations and somehow be a part of those evaluations. I'm sorry, it's never going to work. It's never going to happen. And I don't really think it should. Like, I understand transparency, but look, these people are out there doing a job. When you get your performance review at work, you get it one-on-one with your supervisor, right? So that's the way it should be. That's the way it is. But know for certain that there are reviews done. There's an evaluation after every game because there's a supervisor monitoring the officials. And if they're doing a poor job as the season goes on, they don't get playoff games and things like that. You only take the best of the best, if you will, on through the season. So keep that in mind. We're never going to get behind that closed door, and probably for good reason. On Jason's point, though, about what we should be looking for or what could be removed from official reviews, I just want to come back to, and Dan, you touched on it. Let's just focus on how long it takes. And let's just set a number. Like, I really think 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes at the outside. If you can't determine after 2 full minutes, it's a longer time than you think. If you can't determine after 2 minutes if the play was onside, offside, whatever it is you're trying to review, that's it. move on, call on the ice or play on the ice stands, because I think we're just relying way too much on the technology. We're not robots. Humans are playing the game. Humans are officiating the game. Let's just put a timeline on it. Frankly, if a goal is scored after a player was a fraction of a skate blade offside, and we spend 16 minutes trying to figure that out, and the goal came 38 seconds after the zone entry, which was half a skate blade offside. Stop it. Just for the love of all things holy, stop it. So let's put a time limit on it. If you can't determine in that amount of time, let's just be humans about it and get the damn iPads out of the way. Oh, I'm frustrated, Jason. I take back the nice things I said about Ottawa.
My only question, Mike, is does the 90 seconds start from the time the iPad starts working?
Oh boy, did we ever have that issue last week? My goodness. Yes, it does. It has
Okay.
to be. Yeah. So let's just make sure that all of the hardworking off ice staff at the games make sure it's plugged in, it's powered up, it's got battery backup, and it's logged into when we start the game. Jason, great email. Let's go next to Charlie. We're going to stay in the East. Charlie from Kingston, our buddy. Personally, I get sick and tired of watching great hockey games end up in a shootout. To me, nothing ruins that old time feeling of a Friday night barn burner than watching that god awful gimmick. Mike, as you would expect, I was at the London Knights Kingston Frontenac's game on Friday, and it held up to the hype. Back and forth drama, a last second goal. Okay, last 30 seconds. But yes, you're right, Charlie. This was the kind of game that needed a finish. Instead, it went to a shootout. Kingston ties it with just under 30 seconds to play, Dan. They force extra time in a shootout. I don't think Charlie's breaking any new ground here, but he clearly knows how I feel about this. I think the shootout should be abolished. Give me 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime. If you can't settle it then, honestly, I'll take a tie.
Yeah, Charlie, you're gonna get a pretty short segment here on your question because I think Mike and I are pretty much in agreement with you. Let's and what Mike just said, 10 minutes. What's wrong with 10? I know you want to get the teams on the road, you want to get everyone out of the building. It's an extra 5 minutes we're talking about, and it's unlikely to ever come to that anyway with 3-on-3. So I'm all for that. Let's get rid of the shootout. It does kind of take the wind out of the sails of a great game, doesn't it, Charlie? Like that one we just saw. I'm with you.
Absolutely. Okay. Brian sends an email to ohlpodcast at rogers.com. I'm loving this one. Guys, I'd love to know why announcers of hockey games, I think I just got looped into this here, say now there is the insurance marker when it's in the first and second period. To me, an insurance marker goal comes in the last minute of play in the third period. This drives me crazy every time I hear it. I'm always yelling at the screen that it's not an insurance marker. Just about every game I watch or listen to, I hear that. Now, I used to live in Kitchener, and I used to be a season ticket holder. I'm now living in the Philippines, and I buy the CHL package so I can watch all the games in all three leagues. And I hear this insurance goal so much. I even see it in the online scoring. Insurance goal gets marked down. Go Rangers, go. Thanks in advance. We'll be watching the podcast to see if you cover this topic. Brian, screw you in the Philippines, pal. It's snowing like bejeepers outside as we record this episode of the pod. And Brian actually sent a follow-up email that says, Farwell, I think I've heard you say this before too. And Brian's probably right. I'll get to that in a moment. Dan, your thoughts on insurance goal?
Yeah, Brian, it sounds like for you, it's like me with baseball. I hate when the announcers balls laced down the line in the corner, clearly extra bases. He says there's a base hit into the corner because if you're listening on the radio, you don't know it's going to be extra bases. But that's my pick on this one. I hear you. I mean, ask the Niagara Ice Dogs if they had their insurance goal in the game against Peterborough today when they were up by 2 and they ended up losing. What I will say is that when you see it in those box scores, it and game winning, those are actually official statistical measures now that they put in the box score until it's no longer true. So it's think of it as a current status thing. And I'm not saying I agree with her or not. I think it's silly to label these goals partway through the game like you're talking about. It's not official till the game's over. There either was an insurance goal in the game or there wasn't. There's always a game winning goal. So call it after the game. But that's why you see it, Brian, is that they mark those in the box score at current time, at present time. This is serving as the game winning goal, or this is serving as the insurance goal. All silly though until it's official, right?
Once again, Dan, you are spot on when it comes to this. But can I just make the argument that we don't need this as a statistical category. I don't know where it came from, and perhaps I should speak to some directors of analytics to find out why. But this is the goofiest damn thing I've ever seen. Like what Brian's getting at, and the way the insurance goal is marked is the goal that puts a team up by 2 insurance, because if the other team scored 1, obviously they wouldn't tie the game. So it gets marked now as an official stat, which has got to be one of the silliest things that I've ever heard. Maybe there's a reason for it that goes beyond my comprehension, but I'm with you, Brian. Quite frankly, I wouldn't even want it kept as an official stat because it's weird. And certainly you don't score an insurance goal in the first period unless you win 6-1 and you got the third goal in the first period. And that will stand up until the end of the game as the insurance goal when it was scored. As for idiots like me who broadcast games and sometimes call insurance goals before their time, I promise you, this is something that vexes me as much as it clearly vexes you, Brian. I don't want that to be the case. I don't want you to be vexed. Sometimes, maybe more of the time than we care to admit, us broadcasters just try to fill time. Like we've got a lot of time to fill and we don't want any dead space in there. So we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk. If I ever do it again, email me right away and tell me to stop doing that because I truly try very hard, unless it's an empty net or if it's going into the empty net and it is literally that insurance goal, that's when I try to use it. But I can't recall the time I've used it before that. But if you say I have, I take you at your word, and I want you to call me on it the next time I do because it should not be said. And I don't know why it's a stat. So silly. So silly. Okay, one more in the inbox, OHL podcast at Rogers.com. And I wish I emailed this fella back or this woman back because it just says Baycats suck as the email address. It doesn't have a name on it. So I can't figure out who Baycats suck is. However, where are the Baycats? Is that Thunder Bay?
That's Barry in the
The
intercounty
Barry
baseball
Baycats.
league, I
That's right.
believe. Yeah.
So we're going to go Barry on this. And I love this one. Guys, just wanted to say how much I love the content. Keep up the great entertainment and videos. Flattery is always a good way to start. I want to share my idea you could put in your next video. I'm a big OHL jersey collector, so I was wondering if you could do a jersey or logo ranking of all the teams. If that would take up too much time, maybe just do a top 10 or 5 list. Thank you. Baycats suck. Barry Baycats will call you from now on. Good ear, Dan. Uh, I haven't even told Dan this. So if I take you back half a step, thank you to those of you who have noticed the extra effort put into the video side of this podcast. That's our buddy Mark, who has stepped up to try to make us look a little better on the video side of this. If, by the way, you need any of your visual productions to look better, send us an email. We'll connect you with Mark. This guy is a magician, as you can see. And so he's new to everything we're doing here. And it was a few weeks ago that he said to me, "Hey, what's the best logo in the Ontario Hockey League?" And I said, "Well, the answer is blank." He's like, "Are you sure?" So then I took a closer look and I came up anyway. The bottom line is this. Mark and I decided, and Dan, I was going to spring it on you later as we're getting close to Christmas. I thought this would be a fun thing to do as we head to the holidays. So for Barry Baycat, maybe this is something we can touch on and do maybe a top 3, maybe a top 5 logos before the Christmas break. What say you, Mahar?
I love the idea, and especially of only doing 3 or 5 because I don't want to offend anyone who's going to be in my bottom 10 or 5. So,
Oh, we're gonna offend everybody. Forget it. That's fine, though. That's the whole point.
all right. Well, I'm all for it. Let's do it. I'm just going to throw an honorable mention right now into best gimmick in the league is that mangy thing on the wire in Sudbury for sure.
Okay, I'll give you that. It's pretty solid, but how about also in Sudbury, how about the water tower being lit up when they score a goal in the arena? I saw that on social this week. I'm like, "You know what? That's kinda cool. No matter where you are in Sudbury, you know the Wolves just scored a goal because the water tower gets lit up red. Nice job up there in the Nickel City."
And see, that's what I love about OHL markets like Sudbury. Aren't they the essential OHL market, Mike, where the whole town knows what's going on when the water tower lights up. It's not like if you drop a team in the middle of Newmarket and half the people be like, "What on earth is going on?" Everyone, well, most in Sudbury care about the OHL. And that's the kind of market you're looking for.
Absolutely. Okay, and on the notes of rankings, I ran into a scout at the Rangers game this past weekend. He said, "Farwell, it's time for an updated scouts room ranking. And I said, if you want it, we got a full-on turkey dinner, mashed potatoes, dressing, cranberry sauce. We're talking all the fixings in the media room at the Kitchener Rangers game this weekend. Shout out to Village Caterer who takes care of us in the media room. But this guy is still saying it's still not the best room because it's too crowded. Oh, sorry. The league is so, or the team is so popular, or the media room is so popular. It's also centrally located. But he made a good point. So we're gonna address that again sometime later this season. The best media and scout rooms in the league, based on not only quality of food, but quality of service and creature comforts for the scouts and media that hang out in those rooms. That's coming too. So brace yourself. Brace yourself. Okay, something we started a few weeks ago, our promise, our commitment to you to make sure that your team gets a little bit of love on every episode of this podcast. A little something we call the wraparound. Dan, you are on Western Conference duty this week, so I think that means you're starting us off with the Erie Otters. I hope it's the Erie Otters.
Correct, you are. And I just wanted to point out that Oliver Turner and Michael D'Alessio both signed this week for Erie. Two big gets from their past draft crop. Great on Erie.
Interesting, as I go over to the East, it's also about a signing with the Barrie Colts. Ben Bowen leaves the BCHL's Chilliwack Chiefs and signs with the Colts. He was a second-round pick last spring. And this is a bit of a theme on the Eastern side with my wraparound this week. Also, congrats to former Colt Ethan Cardwell on his first NHL goal in San Jose's win over Seattle. I don't know why Cardwell is always a former Colt and not a former Spirit, but anyway.
Nice. Well, and we'll jump down to Flint, where I wanted to point out 2023 first round pick, Jeremy Martin, some concerns about his production. 4 goals on the year, 3 of those coming in the last 4 games, starting to wake up. Great signs for Flint.
All right, from Flint, I take us over to Brampton, where Porter Martone reached 150 career points with 2 assists in the Steelheads' 3-2 win in Sarnia. That means Martone reached the milestone against his former team. Remember that? Martone taken 5th overall by the Sting back in 2022, then traded to the Steelheads along with Angus McDonnell for Ethan Del Mastro and Luca Del Bel Belluz. Sarnia lost to London that year in the West Final. That's the note I was trying to scribble for myself. Martone now, by the way, 151 points in 143 games.
And he fought his buddy Michael Misa this week, so just point that out. But
can I interrupt you?
You can.
Okay, before you go, because we talked last week. I think the league might be listening to this podcast, Dan, because listen, you mentioned Michael Misa in a fight. Come on. We talked about the 3-fight limit maybe not being enough, right? The OHL put out on social media about Misa, what can't this guy do? Goal, assist, fight. They promoted publicly the Gordie Howe hat trick. Come on.
Yeah, if you're selling the game based on it, time to get that limit up a little, maybe. Sure.
7. I want 7 fights, please.
All right. Well, speaking of fighting and penalty minutes in general, moving to Guelph, I wanted to just point out that they've got a league low 257 penalty minutes. So, most disciplined team in the league, not enough jam. Have your debate.
All right, we'll leave the Storm fans to have that debate because they're struggling so far this year. I'll take you over to Brampton. Brantford, pardon me, Brantford. Mark is editing this right now. I'm going, Farwell, what is the matter with you? Head coach Jay McKee picked up career coaching win number 250 back on November the 21st in a 5-2 win over Peterborough. And don't look now, but Nick Lardis is just 1 goal behind Michael Misa for the league lead. Misa had 10 goals in his first 5 games this season, but Lardis has caught up, and now with Misa facing possible suspension, Lardis might overtake him for goal-scoring lead.
Your boy Lardis.
I love that guy.
All right, turning to Kitchener, I just want to point out that while flu-ridden, Jackson Parsons let in 6 goals on 11 shots in the second game of the year, and despite that, smoking the league with a 2.12 GAA, 926 save percentage, 3 shutouts. Any doubt the best goalie in the league right now? I don't think so.
All right, to Kingston I go, and we find Cedric Gandon committing to the University of Vermont for next season. 10th overall to Owen Sound back in 2020. 221 points in 230 career games, a fourth rounder to the Montreal Canadiens, but Gandon is taking advantage of that rule change and headed to the NCAA.
Good for you, Cedric. Good job. Moving to London, I wanted to point out someone that's a little below the radar. When we always talk about London, but one player that's really caught my eye this year, fantastic skater, is William Nickel, quietly over a point a game for that team, who is currently on an 18-game winning streak. Doesn't get the acclaim he often should. William Nickel having a heck of a year.
To Niagara for me and the bunch in St. Kitts, the Ice Dogs add 17-year-old forward Blake Aerosmith in a deal with the London Knights. London gets 2/3 and a sixth in return. Aerosmith had 4 goals, 2 assists in 15 games for the Knights. He picked up an assist in his second game in Niagara.
Nice. Turning to Owen Sound, Wayne Gretzky, Adam Oates, Landon Hookie. I just want
Excuse
to
you?
point out that,
What? Wait, who?
Landon Hookie, 11 assists in his last 7 games, becoming quite the disher.
The Disher.
Yeah,
Okay.
dishing to teammates for setting up his teammates. He's team first. He's facilitating the goals.
I love it.
Playmaker Landon.
He's a disher.
Yeah.
Landon Disher Hookie. North Bay for me, the battalion. Here comes that theme again. Have signed 18-year-old winger Nick Wellenreiter from the Coquitlam Express of the BCHL. Wellenreiter is a University of Maine commit, a native of Houston. How do you think he felt? How do you think Wellenreiter felt when his first game in the Ontario Hockey League was supposed to be in the Sioux and it got snowed out? He's like, bring back Houston, please and thank you. Anyway, another BCHL decommit, this time to North Bay.
Yeah, no kidding on the weather. Moving to Saginaw, we talked about him already in this podcast, but gotta point out Michael Misa's current 10-game point streak, 21 points over that time. He'll now get to sit and watch probably a bit from the press box, but an impressive run he's on.
All right, to Oshawa I go, where Luke Torrance picked up career point number 100 with an assist in a 4-2 win over Sudbury. And Tribute Community Center Arena, which is a great junior hockey arena, hosted one of those 2 CHL USA Prospects Challenges this week.
Yeah, and Sarnia is my next stop, and I'm going to give you a good and bad. The good, Beckham Edwards, 16-year-old with 12 goals. That kid's going to be dynamite in the future. However, Sarnia Sting's struggling a little bit right now. A 1 win in their last 10, and an 11% power play is not helping.
All right, to Ottawa I go, 77 goals scored. They added 3 more today, make it 80. That's the third fewest in the Eastern Conference, ahead of only North Bay and Peterborough. They've lost, 6 of 8 overall, and Philip Ekberg is tied for second in rookie scoring. So there's your good and bad there. Ottawa is struggling to score, but Ekberg is getting it done as a rookie.
Nice. One of my former prospects of the week, I might add.
I remembered that when I wrote it down.
So moving up
if I won't pump Dan's tires, he'll pump them himself. No, take note of it.
Someone's got to, right? So, moving up to Snow St. Marie, I wonder if Andrew Gibson is anxious to get out of there. Probably not. He's heart and soul on that team. But I wanted to point out that when he had a lower body injury, missed a couple games in the last week, the team did not do so well. Quietly one of the most important pieces on that team. And I wonder if he won't be the top defenseman chip on the trade market.
All right, to Peterborough I go, where Commissioner Brian Crawford's league-wide tour took him this past week. He calls the Petes one of the OHL's, quote, heritage brands. Easton Rye stopped 42 of 43 shots as the Petes picked up win number 2, 4-1 in North Bay. And then, as we already talked about, lo and behold, make it 2 wins in the span of about a week as they come from behind against the Niagara Ice Dogs. And defenseman Matthew Jenkin got to play against his brother Noah in London, a 6-0 loss for the Petes.
Good day for the Jenkins, though.
Absolutely. You got to love to see that.
For sure. So I'm going to finish up, Mike, with Windsor, Border City. I've been told by numerous NHL types that the best way to indicate whether a team is good or not, aside from the standings, is what's their goal differential. Windsor with a league-leading plus 37. So take from that what you will.
Oh, I'll take from that they are a whale of a team, much improved from 10th place last year, and I might have thought they were going to still miss the playoffs, but that's okay. If Dan won't deflate my tires, I'll deflate them myself. And I close out the East in Sudbury, where Jets prospect Kieran Walton is on a 5-game goal scoring streak. He has scored 7 in the past 5 games, including a couple in a 5-3 win over Barrie on Friday. And also, just to wrap up the theme I told you was part of the Eastern Conference this week, the Wolves have signed 17-year-old Kamani Eccleston from the Brockville Braves. Eccleston promptly picked up a point in his first OHL game. He is committed to Union College in the NCAA. And that is your look around the entire Ontario Hockey League, little something we like to call the wraparound. Here's a question. Did Canada and the U.S. renew their hockey rivalry at the Prospects Challenge? Or, and speaking of prospects, our prospects of the week are coming up on the OHL podcast. When it's time for the game, it is time for game time. Want to hear some squeak, squeak, swish at the basketball game tonight? Game time. The crack of helmets and shoulder pads at the football game? Game time. Sharp metal on ice and boards shuddering with body checks? Yeah, game time. Download the Game Time app today and get access to all of this and more. Concerts, theater, stand-up comedy, it's all on Game Time. When you open the app, just pick the event you want to see. You'll get a full range of pricing, and don't forget to look for the super deal. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, gets you right to the good stuff so you don't have to waste time sorting through fluff. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Dan, a couple of games this week, one in London, the other in Oshawa. The Canada-USA Prospects Challenge. What are your takeaways from the 2-game event?
My takeaway is it was a bit of a mismatch. And I know the scores. So I think a 6-1 Canada win the first game, 3-2 in the second. You say, oh, wow, the US NTDP team really got their act together in game 2. Well, not so much. Anyone who watched it saw the ice was tilted in that one, too. Very flattering for the Americans to have the score how it was. It was kind of like men amongst boys, Mike, and I'm sure that's not what the organizers had in mind. Typically, you'd see a much better effort. It's maybe a bit of a down year for the national team development program in the States, and what a year it's going to be for the CHL in this draft from all the scouting reports we're seeing so far. So, bit of a mismatch. Still love the concept. A lot of animosity, entertaining games, but Canada kind of had their way with them.
Yeah, love the concept as well. And the fact that Canada kind of had their way with the US. Look, it's 2 games. We can call it a small sample size because it is. But Dan, could this have come, honestly, at a better time for the CHL in light of this NCAA rule change? All the movement we've already seen, each league now kind of trying to find its footing on this new landscape. Boy, oh boy, if this doesn't help attract players, more players from the USHL, from the BCHL, and really solidify, I know it's early days, but with so much attention on these leagues, with so much noise around the game right now, I can't help but think there were people sitting back in league offices across the CHL just rubbing their hands together with glee because this could not have worked out any better, in my opinion, for the CHL over the 2-game mini tourney.
You're right, especially because it's such a strong year for the CHL in the draft. And I think the biggest winners in all of this were the players themselves who got to participate. Because if anyone had any doubt, sometimes when you see a lot of players from one feeder league ranked high in the draft, you say, well, is it just because there's weaker competition around them? Well, they got a chance to show against different competition, against direct competition in this coming draft. And boy, did they ever show up. I think some of these CHLers just moved themselves up the rankings if that was possible.
What's good for the players, something that Dan just said. And I just want to take a moment before we get to our prospects of the week to remind you of that. All of this change that's going on right now in hockey, I still do believe it's benefit to the player with the increased flexibility, with the lack of necessity of making a huge decision at the age of 15, for example. I think all of these things are benefiting players, and these are young hockey players. That's what it should be about. And let's just keep our eyes on this as we move forward. Follow the money in some cases, and see what is really good for the people, the young people that still play this game, because it's a great game, and hopefully it continues to provide ample opportunity for everyone who joins it. Let's grow them as people and as potential future professional hockey players. All right, the players we have our eyes on as perhaps the best of the future potential pro bunch this week are weekly prospects of the week. Dan Mahar, who you got?
Well, I'm tying mine into that rivalry series we just talked about, Mike. Mine is Kashawn Aitchison of the Barrie Colts. Player with 17 points in 22 games. It's not all goals and assists, even though he's got 5 of those points in the last 3 games, including a 3-point game in his last outing. What I really like about this player, and he acquitted himself so well in the rivalry series, is like I just said, it's not always about goals and assists. This guy's always in the game. Physical, aggressive, getting under the opponent's skin. He's got compete written all over him. He's got some pro skills written all over him. And I think a series like this is just going to boost his profile, because you get a lot more than meets the eye when you see a player of his ilk. So Kashawn Aitchison is my prospect of the week, Mike.
All right. And from Aitchison and Barrie, I look north to the Sioux, where I think they are still shoveling out. I can't believe how quickly that snow fell, even causing the postponement of a game. And that might be the only thing that cools down Travis Hayes right now. 1 goal, 3 assists, and a +2 in his past 3 games. That's 1/4, those 4 points this week of his season's point total of 16. So 1/4 coming in just the past 3 games. Look, we know that Hayes benefits from playing with line mates like Brady Martin and Justin Cloutier in the Sioux, but if you're going to play with guys like that, you got to have a motor. Hayes has shown himself to be a little bit streaky when it comes to the production so far this season, but let's hope, at least from where I'm sitting, this streak carries him into some more consistency as we approach Christmas and go into the second half. But the Sioux Greyhounds, Travis Hayes is my prospect of the week.
Heck of a talent Hayes is, and he's just got to stay healthy. He's had a few injuries over the years too, so he's got to stay in that lineup, but a heck of a talent.
All right. So, Dan, we are committed to, at minimum, heading into Christmas, we will do a top league logos segment sometime before the holidays or around the holidays. A little Christmas treat. I can't believe we have just turned the calendar to December. I felt like we almost crawled to the quarter point of this season. And next thing you know, I mean, I looked at our calendar today, 7 games left before the Christmas break, by which time, December the 20th, we will have played 33 games with the Kitchener Rangers. That's half. The second quarter is moving fast, at least from where I'm sitting.
It goes quickly, and that's why if you're not in gear, you better get in gear, or you're going to find yourself outside looking in.
And don't ever forget, don't leave a junior hockey game early, or you might miss 3 goals in quick succession from both teams. Or if you're Dan, you might go to a work function instead of going to a junior hockey game. Big mistake. Big mistake. That guy over there is Dan Mahar. You'll find him on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm Mike Farwell on X at Farwell_OHL. We love the emails. Keep them coming. OHLpodcast@Rogers.com. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, especially on YouTube. That means a lot for us here on the show. And leave a comment either on YouTube, on the podcast page, wherever you get it from. Love your feedback. Keep it up, and we will be back in your ears in 1 week's time with another episode of the OHL Podcast.